One of the thoughts that's kind of been a guiding principle for me that I'll share, but then I'm more interested in sharing the statistic because I can see my guiding principle being extremely unpopular too, right?
Okay.
So when I was considerably younger, it's weird to think how long, not only have the 8 years passed, but now I've been graduated for the 8 years and I don't have a PhD. um, I was probably 21 or 22 at the time, and there was a guy that lived in our neighborhood that I was talking to, and he always seemed like a wise guy, but he was really quiet, didn't talk a whole lot, so he wasn't super flashy. But I was talking with him one day, and he made mention of a statement that probably my wife hates, right? But the statement is, if you will live the next 10 years of your life like most people won't, you can live the rest of your life like most people can't. And this is something that I think a lot of people have heard. And so I've spent a lot of time contemplating, okay, I can deliberately choose not to do this, but the back end of that means I don't have a choice anymore, right? If I make healthy choices now, long term, I get to say, am I going to work 50 hours a week when I'm 50, 60, 70? But if I work really, really hard now, I get the choice to say I'm only going to work 20 hours or less or whatever the case may be. Okay, so that's my philosophy. If you live the next 10 years of your life like most people won't, then you can live the rest of your life like most people can't, right? Okay, now here's the statistic, and this is what might make it unpopular. A research study that was done recently suggested that as many as 20% of Americans spend an average of nearly 6 hours working over weekends and holidays. So, on average, people may spend upwards of 6 hours working over a weekend or a holiday, which I think the assumption is these are people who don't work weekends and don't work
Sure.
holidays, right? So people who've put in their 40-ish, but they get the weekend off, are still putting in an average of 6 hours, which according to my philosophy, that's what you ought to be doing, right?
Sure.
Live the next 10 years like most people won't, so you can live the rest like most people can't. Any thoughts on the slippery slope of that, especially in regards to mental health, right?
Yeah. I'm sure we've covered some of this, but you will accomplish a lot less if you burn out trying to do more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the way that I oftentimes tell people is when you're carrying a heavy load, oftentimes the mentality of, well, put something else on it for a short distance just doesn't actually work. You're maxed out.
Yeah.
If I'm laying underneath a bench press, I can't just add a little bit more for one more rep. Like, I'm tired. I'm burnt. I'm already at my max, you know?
Your max, which is probably like 500 pounds.
No, I wish. That's not true. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes pushing a little bit harder isn't necessarily best for your mental health.
Yeah, I think that's the trick, the balance of it. And I think it's different for everyone, right? Because everyone's got different capacity and different, I don't know, things they like and temperances and personalities and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think that there's some kind of equation to be had where you can say, would I rather do this when I'm 25 or would I rather do this when I'm 45? You know? But at the same time, being able to say, like, if I burn hot and burn out by the time I'm 30 and I can't work anymore, it definitely wasn't worth it, right? It's kind of like the slow and steady wins the race. And but I think there is some truth to, like, push yourself while you do have the ability, right? While you into that slightly uncomfortable space, like a stretch, right? It's okay to stretch yourself to be uncomfortable while you can.
Sure.
But don't stretch. You're not going to drop into the splits right away, or that's a bad idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can end up in the ER.
Yeah.
Right? I think both of these guiding principles are really good, and I think that they're good for mental health. I think it goes back to the very core principle of shifting the mindset to doing something difficult, like working, stretching myself at work, will actually help my mental health, rather than I got to get my mental health in place and then I can do the extra heavy lifting at work. but there is a balance there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk really quickly about an intervention that they talked about in here. The idea behind this article is that we should use our weekends to recover.
Mm.
But on average, we're working 6 hours over a
Sure.
weekend, right? So if you have any thoughts on interventions, I'm open to it. But I wanted to share the one
totally.
they had. So one of the things that they said was, if you look at what kind of energy you're expending at your place of employment, over the weekend, in order to recover, you want to do something or engage in something that's almost the exact opposite.
Okay.
So for example, I have a fairly lengthy family history of family members working in grocery stores, and it tends to be a fairly physically demanding job. You work tough hours. I think I mentioned
Probably
before.
on your feet a lot.
On your feet a lot, yep.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned before we started this, my mom woke up pre 3 a.m. this morning, getting close to the holiday to be there. The idea would be that type of recovery weekend would be almost like a sedentary, not doing anything, relaxing kind of thing. The opposite would be you and I, where our profession is this,
A lot of sitting. Yeah.
sitting and talking.
Yeah.
Their recommendation would be that our leisure activities be something that's completely opposite, something that's a little bit physically demanding, something like maybe hiking, something like swimming. You know, you want to swim in December or January around here, but one of the things that they found was that energy in leisure activities that is quite different from day-to-day work actually helps people recover more effectively and at a quicker pace.
I like that.
So perhaps a brief intervention, if you're feeling burnt out at work, is sit down and see what kind of energy you're expending at work. And then over the weekend, and it doesn't have to be Saturday, Sunday, if your weekend is Tuesday, Wednesday, if it's Monday, Friday, do something that is the opposite of the energy that's expended, including even social. If you're a fairly isolated person at work, be social on the weekend. Right?
I like that. I like that idea a lot. My only thought is, like, as far as interventions go, is we talk a lot about, like, don't wait for your mental health to get better to work, right? Work to better your mental health. It's just to keep that the CBT triangle in mind, which I'm sure we've mentioned before, but this idea that your thoughts impacts your beliefs and feelings, impacts your actions, impacts your thoughts. And a lot of times we worry about, let's change our thoughts or our feelings or our beliefs so that our actions are different. But sometimes we can start with the actions, right? And say, well, if I did feel better, this is what I would do. So do that thing if you don't feel better, or if you don't feel good, and you will feel better. Does that make sense?
It does to me, and I think that's why we're doing some of this idea here, because I don't know that that's a fairly typical thought process.
Right.
You know, I think when we started talking about employment several weeks ago, the pitch that I presented was, if you listed the symptoms of depression, work has the ability to naturally combat some of those. You know, it gives you a purpose for waking up, getting out of bed, being motivated. Whether you enjoy your coworkers or not, you get to be social.
Sure.
You're kind of forced to, right? And so you start with the action. It naturally can combat some symptoms of mental health. But you got to be careful, because if you're doing the 6 hours over the weekend and you burn really hot really quick, burnout becomes a big thing.
Yeah. I like that. I
Anyway.
like that article.
Just a thought.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for this week's video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment if there's anything else you want us to cover. If you have any questions, we'd love to engage with you guys. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.
Enjoy work. Thanks, guys.